Welcome, everybody, and a very nice, warm welcome to Jim Smethurst students who are joining us tonight. So tonight we are at lecture number 2 of S.O.S, edited by John Bracey Jr., Sonia Sanchez, and James Smethurst. This part 2 of S.O.S, Calling All Black People a Black Arts Movement Reader, an extraordinary book, by the way, is part of our fall festival. So that's it. I'm going to disappear and turn it over to Jim and our dear sister, Sonia Sanchez.
Hi, Jim. How are you?
I'm good. How are you, Sonia?
I was coming down the steps. I think that I'm 18, right? But the thing that helped me is that I was holding on to the banister, but I turned my right foot. So it's just a little sore. So I called to Marani. Marani said, "What happened to you?" And I said, "I was rushing down the steps and I turned my foot, but it should be okay. I put for a moment a little ice on it, so it should right. I tell you, some days, right?
Yeah.
How are you?
Good.
So do we begin now?
I guess so.
Mm-hmm.
After you, Alphonse.
You want me to go first?
Yeah. Do you want to?
Okay. For those people who are here, usually there was a third person with us, right? A dear friend, colleague by the name of Professor John Bracey. And so what we decided to do is that we decided to read what we had written for him, because he died almost, it'll be a year, won't it? It'll be a year, right, Jim?
Not even.
Yeah, huh?
Yeah.
Right. Dear John, thank you for your patience. A poem for you and the great woman you call your mother. I hope you like it. Was written in much love and respect for the family. In Love, Struggle, Peace, Sonia, Part 1. Soon, oh soon, one morning for John Bracey. She came from a long line of Dubosian women, your mother, coming among us with parasol breath, eyes iron and steel, allow no frailty to accent her early life. She came from a bloodline of colored educator seekers, women and men who reconstructed themselves, kneeled down at the sound of freedom, answered life affirmatively, having learned how to dance around the calendar of Southern cells. Once again, April runs yellow with rain in Amherst. There are no Southern owls hooting on our Northern fears. 2. And I recall the last time I saw Helen Harris Bracey sitting on her memory in your house, John, her face twinkling as she leaned back on her eyes, and I saw all of our mothers coming over fields and sand, resurrecting color from a white season. And I heard all of our voices crossing old rivers with iron legs, and I understood that we must all lay our bodies upon the ground, rescue our eyes from mourning, perform wonders in a wonderless place. Soon, oh soon, one morning. Nangadeth, Mama Bracey. How are you, Mama Bracey? We have taken up your songs and liberated ourselves. Nangadeth, Mama Bracey. How are you, Mama Bracey? We have become camp followers of your blood. We have finally anchored ourselves at the beginning of your creation. Soon, oh soon, one morning. Nangadeth, Mama Bracey. I thought that what was important for some of the students to truly understand John, since he's not with us, participating and talking and answering every possible question that we had. Is that not right, Jim? Right.
Yes.
With that fantastic memory, I figured that I needed to bring him into this discussion. So I also then, for part 2, did 6 evening haiku for Dr. John Bracing. The morning gathers you in her arms, holds you in black wonder. Remember how you walked your light into every university room. You were motion sailing amid the stars. In your class, Tubman, Douglas, Du Bois, and Malcolm whispered, resist, resist, resist. In a circle of touch, your words whispered family. The day stands still with longing for your intellect. I say the day stands still with longing for your intellect. For John Bracing.
Well, I guess I'd like to say a couple words about John Bracey before we start talking about the theater. Just to say that I work with John Bracey for more than 20 years here in the W.E.B. Du Bois Department of Afro-American Studies here at UMass Amherst. And as Sonia said, John, I mean, he had to be just about the smartest person I ever met in my life. And as she said, he had an unbelievable memory, but he also had an unbelievable he had a lot to remember, let's just say. He did a lot, and he read a lot, and he knew about stuff. There's stuff that you knew John knew about, and there are things that you would not know that he knew about, but he would know about it. Something would come up about Slovenian science fiction, don't ask how. And he'd go, oh yeah, Slovenian science fiction. And then he would go off, and there'd be about 5 or 6 authors he would mention and talk about his favorite novel or something like that. And you're just like, where'd you find the time to read all this stuff? While being an activist, while being a teacher, and watching a lot of baseball and basketball. So that was, John was an amazing person. I mean, he was absolutely key in putting the S.O.S. anthology together. I mean, he was a historian by I don't know if by trade is quite the word, but I mean, that's by training. And so he brought to us, a real historian's, a sense of, well, not only the sense of the history, but also a sense of care, of making sure we got things right. And so that's important. One other person I'd like to mention too, you saw the picture of S.O.S. When you saw the original thing, is also, if you see the painting on there, it was by another colleague of mine, Nelson Stevens, the great painter, who also has passed within the last year. Yeah. And I just wanted to say, Ashe, safe home to Nelson too, because he was an inspiration to us.
Yes, he was. Yeah.
So first off, I guess I don't know how many, or if any of you saw the last time that Sonia, the last Zoom that Sonia and I did for Stella Adler. We were talking more generally about the Black arts movement. In case you haven't, basically the Black arts movement, and Sonia, this is really funny because one of John's sayings that people may have heard me say before about, or what description of us when we would go on the road promoting the S.O.S. anthology, is that we were Gladys Knight and the Pips, and Sonia was Gladys Knight and John was the Pips. I were the Pips, so Sonia would be singing, Midnight Train to Georgia, and I'd be there going Superstar, but he never got far or whatever. But just to think about that, and she's also a major figure of the movement we're describing. So it's a little daunting to do this in front of Sonia, but I think, I
won't boo.
Okay, thank you, Sonia. But, one way of thinking about the Black arts movement is, it's a shorthand, a name that was coined from Larry Neal, who really got it sort of from Amiri Baraka, as a shorthand for talking about, the Black art and culture of the 1960s and 1970s that was in the service of Black liberation in particular, and human liberation in general. Sometimes it's described as the cultural wing of the Black Power movement, but I don't think that quite gets it, because that sort of suggests that it was secondary, but that in actuality, you really couldn't distinguish them. You could just as easily say that Black Power was the political wing of Black arts, is that they were really very, very tied together, mostly because, much in the spirit of, among other people, Malcolm X, who was such an incredible influence on almost everybody in Black arts, is Malcolm X was a political man as well as a spiritual man, but he had a very culturally based politics. When he would, in one of his frequent speeches, would ask his audience, a Black audience, who taught you how to hate yourself? Who taught you how to hate the color of your skin and the texture of your hair and the shape of your nose? He was talking culturally. He was talking about culture. He wasn't just talking about some white person on the street pointing at you saying you ugly. He was talking about how through culture, how through the media, how through education, how through the arts, that people were taught. So that he was making a cultural argument, and he was suggesting that if there isn't like a I don't know, countercultural argument, because that has a meaning, but if there isn't an opposing argument, if Black people don't have their own argument against it in a positive kind of way, not just in a negative way, then you're going to be imprisoned by this. So I think that this was so that's a way of saying that Black arts and Black power tended to be made up of politically minded artists, or politically and socially concerned artists, and artistically and culturally inclined or interested political activists, often who, like with Sonia or Miri Baraka, June Jordan, you name it, Jane Cortez, were one and the same, right? They were both activists, political leaders, often even, and great artists. So that's sort of, I think, a way of thinking about it. And basically what they were talking about is a radical art, but a radical art not for a coterie of a bunch of bohemians or hipsters in a basement somewhere or a coffee shop, but they were talking about changing the world. Only way you do that is with millions of people. So they were saying, how can we reach millions of Black folks in the first place, and other people who might be inclined to be supportive or be a part of the struggle. And so, it was a very interesting movement, because they, had to think aesthetically, in terms of craft, in terms of ideology, in terms of a whole lot of things. So how do they go about creating an art that's politically radical, that's formally radical, and yet, as Kalamu Ya Salam, the great New Orleans poet, said, so familiar that it just seems like home. Is how do you do that? It's a very tough thing, and nobody had one answer to it, right? People had a lot of different thoughts about how it might be. There were a lot of different ideologies. There were a lot of people would talk about a Black aesthetic, but there was never one Black aesthetic that really dominated. It was people trying to think about what might, or the Black aesthetic. They're trying to think about what a Black aesthetic might be, or what a set of Black aesthetics might be. And one thing that was very, very common in terms of, if you can say, an aesthetic commonality, is that partly in order because of their own predilections, partly in order to reach so many people, is that they tried to break down the barriers between different sorts of genres and media. In other words, that you would sometimes see a Black arts performance, if you will, and you could come away from, well, what was that poetry? Was that dance? Was that music? Was that theater? What was that? Or a musician like Sun Ra, who many Black arts people kind of adopted as a key player, and he participated. What was, visual art, music? He read poetry. There were dancers. There was music of all kinds of varieties, of all, many different varieties of Black music. What was that? And I think that was, but that was the Black tradition made in a more radical form. I mean, what was James Brown? Was it dance? Was it theater when he's Macio's covering him with the cloak? What was it? Was it music? What was it? And I mean, I'm not, so I think that's part of it. That's one reason why I think theater, along with poetry, which was really an allied form for Black arts, many of the greatest Black arts theater people, writers, playwrights, like Amiri Baraka, like Sonia Sanchez, were also Marvin X, you could name a whole bunch, were also, outstanding poets, because of the performance aspect. And I think, just to say a few things about the theater and to turn it over to Sonia, that in some ways, the theater was, well, first of all, the theater, as Doris Derby, who was active in the Black arts movement in the South, said, and was one of the founders of Free Southern Theaters, one of the reasons they founded is it was easy to do all the arts at once. You could have music, you have visual arts, you have dance, you have acting, you have every kind of art, and that was fun, but it also was, it grabbed the audience and helped bring them in. Another reason, that it was so important was that it was kind of the calling card for the movement. I mean, if you lived in a Black neighborhood, there was, and there was a Black theater in your neighborhood or a group that did Black plays, even if you never went to the plays, and often they would be, and we'll get to that in a second, in the street or in the corner in a community room or in a bar, you would at least be aware that you would see the posters around your neighborhood. You'd be aware that in your neighborhood, something was going on, something exciting, and tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands, ultimately Black people. I mean, Sister Sonji by Sonia was performed for a long time every year in Franklin Park in Boston by Elmo Lewis's school, where thousands of people from the Roxbury community would go and see Sister Sonia. I mean, Sister Sonji. Sorry, Sonia, I get conflating you, but which is probably right. But anyway, so that was so in a way it was a kind of calling card for the movement, because it was also so portable. I mean, it was portable in that the place could travel. In other words, Sonia Sanchez did not have to go to Cairo, Illinois, where, she could probably only get very infrequently, if ever, but her plays could go there and be performed there. And that was important. And as I said, that you can perform it with a lot of stagecraft. I mean, stagecraft in the sense of stage props and so forth. It can be very elaborate, or you can perform it as they did in the Black Arts Repertory Theater in school in Harlem on the back of a flatbed truck, on street corners to folk in Harlem. And so I think it was very crucial in that sense, in terms of reaching out. And finally, just the last thing I'll say about why I think it was really, really an important form is that it was a form. I mean, obviously you can have one person shows, as it were, but most often you have people in dialogue, you have people in conversation or a debate that you actually see see people in conversation, in community it embodies community on the stage. And that was very important to the Black arts folks. There are other forms that did that, like music, which was obviously also had a lot of impact on Black arts theater. But the thing about the theater was that, in a sense, the theater could be sonic, it could be musical, but it also could make things plain in a way that was hard to do with John Coltrane. In other words, that John Coltrane, say, made the profound music that he made, but he generally, by and large, resisted explicating his music. That was not mostly what he wanted to do. He would make some comments from time to time. But the Black arts people, both not just in essays, but they could put it on the stage, could essentially explicate, or in performance with poetry, as Sonia Sanchez does with the Coltrane poem, could explicate, could say, this is maybe not the meaning of John Coltrane, but this is a meaning of John Coltrane. It gave people a way of grasping things. So, that it's in a way making the sort of dynamics of the community plain for folk to see. And I think that this was a tremendous legacy of Black arts, and if you think about what comes after Black arts, especially in Black theater, in a sense, what did August Wilson do his entire career but that kind of work of making community and the contradictions and the complexities of Black community plain? So that's my part, Sonia. Do you want to go for it for a while?
I mean, mentioning August Wilson, some people don't know that when I went to a place called University of Pitt, there were playwright people who were in that department, the Black Studies department, which we were just beginning at that particular point. And one of the wonderful things there is that there was a young man who was teaching theater, and he is the person who ended up teaching our dear brother how to write plays. It's an amazing story. I went in that department. One of the things that we did is that first semester, we went to prisons, and we would go in the evenings to the neighborhood and read. And one day, this young man that you said, who became the great playwright here in New York City and around the country, came up to me and said, could I read my poetry, Professor Sanchez? And we said, sure, no problem at all. And he got up on stage and he started to read what I call characters. There was one character after another character after another character talking, whatever. And I turned and said to the playwright who was there at the university, I said, by golly, by gee, I said, he's a playwright. Do you hear what he's doing? What he's saying up there? There's not one thing that is continuous. That there's not one thing that really makes you hear the poem. But what you heard was someone speaking, whatever. And I said to him, would you also, maybe you can take him under your wings and teach him how to write poetry and plays, rather. And he did. The amazing thing about that is that our dear brother, before he died, did an article in the New York Times and talked about Ed Billings, right? And I keep circling his name. Our dear brother there in a place called Pittsburgh, who also taught him how to write plays, and myself included, because he'd come and sit in.
Was it Rob Penny?
Rob Penny, that's right. Rob Penny was an amazing playwright. He taught the course. I did the poetry and the lit, and he would do the teaching of how to write plays. And he took him under his wings. And before our dear brother died, he did an article in the New York Times where he thanked the three of them, the two of them, Penny and I am concentrating a little bit on the pain and not my brain, right? Um, um, uh, and what he did simply at that particular point is that he thanked them for teaching him how to write plays. And it was wonderful seeing him actually do that and say that. I just wanted to, in a sense, to talk about the people, some of the people who wrote, and why they wrote and how they wrote, and also to talk about Amiri Baraka, who was most certainly the person who influenced us all. And so I call this section in the book "The Thunder of Angels." Whoa, the thunder of angels. I stepped on my foot. We can say anything that we want to say, but it's the poets, the artists, the playwrights who sing, who soar. We love them. They come to us glittering like silver stones. Their words, poems so beautiful and prophetic that we catch them in mid-flight, swallow them whole. Their vision, their genius, a gift from the sea. Their lives vibrating, words, songs, their ideas changing the world, shifting the earth until it turned towards justice, peace, and beauty. We can say anything we want to say about these gatherers of beauty, rolling across the seas, earthbound though, these wearer of waves. We see them in the early morning dawn. We see them in the budding flowers. They speak a language. They play a sound that they inherited from the ancients. We have seen these poets from the middle of the 20th century to the beginning of the 21st century. We have seen them at work, moving in the bloodstream of their people. We have seen them look up when someone inferred that this long voice of artistry had been futile, had lacked dignity and art. We have seen their tongues track down these disbelievers. We have seen their poems, words, silence these diplomats of the dead, anoint our hands with eyes. They have known for a long time that we stand on an earth collapsing in a palette of pain, that we stand in the tracks of conquistadors and imperialists, homophobes and racists and terrorists and pornographers, sexists and voyeurs, CEOs and countries who want to own everything, who try to extract our rhythms and put them in a permanent pill box of pain. And these poetry men and women continue to hold up the air. No mystery surrounded them. The cities knew them, felt their touch, saw their solitary eye demanding chains, saw their sparkling hands scoop thunder from their pores. They came warrior clear, their intellect kissing our spines, and their poems brought us life, and we were reborn in their spreading sails of flesh. The word trivia means three in Latin. Whenever three roads met, the Romans put up notice boards with the news. Well, the three roads for this anthology are the past, the present, and the future. This anthology puts up the notice boards that say, listen, listen, listen. These poets, these playwrights, these women and men sequestered in these pages inform us that activism and work that flows from the heart is God-conscious activism. There is an ancient Vedic saying, if you want to create a new body, then you must step out of the river of your own memory and see the world as if for the first time. And our sister, brother poets use new memory to help us see the world of our foremothers and forefathers and ourselves as if for the first time. I think all of them must have been born feet first, must have slid out of the darkness of their mother's wombs into the light of their eyes, running on a fast track. These brothers and sisters of sun and moon downloaded their ancestors who prodded them into an arena called activism and poetry. These careful craftspersons of words and life, aristocratic word sorcerers with a commoner's eye, inform us that intellect and work for our people and all people, and activism and poetry that flows from the heart is God-conscious activism. And these brothers and sisters, their eyes opening like crystals, worked in America and the world, told us to take God out of the sky and put God in our hearts, our feet, our hands, our eyes, our tongues, and they did. We did. We heard the sacred in all of their handprints and footprints as they reset the identity of African Americans and of people of color on the world stage, from tragedy to the heroic celebration of themselves and their people. These women and men resurrected the idea of a new activism in poetry and scholarship. They sat down with the people, listened to them, held them when they cried, laughed out loud with their successes, welcomed their souls, and held their hearts in their hands. These poet visionaries turned the river of memory and made the river turn black, 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 human, human, human. These poets were a Conte Kondo, a deep song of Africa, the Caribbean, the Americas, India, the Middle East. They came with the staccato speech and rhythm of the spirit. Their passion entered this American bloodstream. They no longer sang or spoke for themselves. Something began to move through them. We could see it moving between the beat and the unbeat, the noise and the silence, the darkness and the light. A moment where the sounds rose from their throats entered our blood, and we became the sheroes and heroes and the healers and leaders. They levitated language and motion and souls, organized, wept, laughed, studied, taught, wrote, till time stood still in the 20th century in America. They, through their writings, has summoned the duende, the spirit of all our ancestors who has suffered and yet survived and did it with dignity and grace and order and beauty. These poets told us that we had a firm life, I say life, that our eyes had abandoned death, defeat, supposed inferiority, that our feet were dancing silver as we ate a little earth, as we all must do before we die. These poets, playwrights, heavy with the smell of histories and herstories, put their feet on this American spine and bid us look up at their gospel hands, hanging bamboo poems of life, life, life. These women and men in Ezekiel's valley asked, "Oh Lord, can these bones live?" and discovered that they did live through activism and words and love. Sister Bernice Reagan told me one day about the great blues singer, Brother Montgomery, who said, "We all come here naked. Black folks know it, but white folks don't know it because they come here white. White folks don't come here naked. Their skin is an additional currency, puts them far ahead." He continued, "We all come here naked and must make arrangements for someone else while you're here, and not just do for yourself." That's what these poets did. They made arrangements for someone else while they were here. This anthology then will help us reintroduce our past blood to our present and future blood. Make our memory re-enter our bloodstream in order to erase any death prints. Toni Morrison said, "We die." Whoa. Haven't read this in a while. Toni Morrison said, "We die." That may be the meaning of life, but we do language. That may be the measure of our lives, and how Sister Toni and these poets do this thing called language. Can't see with the liquid coming out the eye. The measure of our lives, how they caress, embrace, untangle this language, recapture our memory, how they stand words up and let them minuet our blood, how they help us recover our silver words as they open up the sorcery of language, take us out on the wings of laughter and pain, intellect and beauty, how they commandeer words spinning under this domestic sky, and they become a river moving against winter sails, repelling ice water ghosts, kneeling on razor-thin knees at confession. Our bodies are tattooed forever with their quicksilver rhythms. We are one, alive, apart from the elasticity of the dead. Give me the Spirit, Lord, Lord, Lord. I say, give me the Spirit, Lord, Lord, Lord. Give me the quick silver courage, Lord. I say, give me the quick silver courage, Lord. Give me the quick silver courage, Lord, so I can spread it over my face and mouth and legs and hands, so I can spread it over my face and mouth and legs and hands. Give me the strength, Lord, to bear the wrath of the country and the world, because I preach and teach and poet and write as an equal, as an equal, as an equal, as an equal. Give me the spirit tongue of 1,000 sons. I say, give me the spirit tongue of 1,000 sons. Give me the spirit tongue of 1,000 sons to warm our hearts, oh Lord, to warm our hearts, oh Lord. Give me the Spirit, O Lord. I say, give me the Spirit, O Lord. Give me the Spirit, O Lord, to come awake in your thunder, so that our eyes can see behind trees, so that our eyes can see behind trees. Help us to remember, Lord, are we not more than hunger and music? Are we not more than harlequins and horns and greed? Are we not more than color and drums? Are we not more than anger and dance? Ah, ye bo bo. Ah, ye bo bo bo. Ah, ye bo 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 bo. Praise God. Praise God. Praise God for these men and women who walk barefoot across our souls, always with a prayer on their tongues, saying, step inside. I say, step inside, Amumwen. I say, step inside, mi amor. Give us the Spirit, Lord, to put on our eyes, and forever, oh Lord, let us be in the eyelash of your memory, where there's always the precision of sisters and brothers sewing themselves into the sleeves of beauty and change. Ah, ah, ye, ba 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 ye, ah ye, ah ye, ah ye, ah ye, bo 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 bo. Praise God for this thunder of angels. And many of the poets wrote the plays, and a piece like that, I read it on purpose, because when we would read something like that on stage, we acted it out. Remember, Jim?
Mm-hmm.
There'll always be the music behind us, right? And all of a sudden the dancers would appear, whatever. And within the context of what we were doing, your voice kept, and you carried the music, you carried the songs, you carried the words, and you carried the feet of the dancers. So it became, a play on the stage appearing right before your eyes. The poetry was never separate from the music for many of us, and never separate for the dancers and the people playing behind you via the drums, via the horns, right? They would give us the music. As we began to read, they would come on stage and begin to play. It was like what you see on the Idiot Box television now, when we did this, people began to pick up and do the same thing. That the stage was not a quiet place. We took over the entire stage, right? And even when I read, I moved when I read quite often. I went behind people. I went behind the music. I went and sat next to Max Roach, right? And hit the drum for a minute and kept going. It was theater via the poetry. It was theater via the words. It was theater via of like saying to people simply, listen and be saved. Listen and leave here loving yourselves forever. And so therefore, going up to 125th Street with Barbara Ann Tier, who had a theater up there, right? she would always invite you to come and just come and do a reading. And you got there, you realized you were doing the whole show at some particular point. She was an amazing playwright and also amazing actress. And she had a theater at 125th Street. And the amazing thing about the theater that she was creating, which became different from the theater that was being created downtown, although we did a lot of street theater downtown, and a lot of the people, like the people here in this place here, did very creative, original plays, whatever, plays that made the audience participate in what was going on stage. And, all of a sudden, Barbara and Tia would come on stage, and we would go down, and we would go and bring people up on stage, right? And we would say some words to them, and then we would do this and ask them, and they became the poets also too. They became the people who began to say things that had changed them, and they began to say, what I see, what I see, what I see, what I saw, what I saw, what I saw. I knew it was I on the stage, or it was my mother on the stage, it was my father on the stage, it was my brother on the stage, and there we were. And the theater went from the stage down to the people, and the people came up on the stage, and they became the actors, and the people who had picked up on the energy of the poems, the energy of the plays, the energy of the words, the energy of the songs, the energy of the dance, and they became a part of the theater. And when they left there, they left the way Brecht wanted you to leave. When you leave a theater, you take the words with you. You'll never forget that. And you take those words into your homes. You take those words into where you work. You take those words into the streets. You take those words into the subway. So quite often we'd be on the subway, we'd stand up and we would recite a poem, right? And people, they read in their paper in the morning, going to work tight, whatever. And they looked up, and there we would be, and we had put up signs, listen out for the poets there. But there we were. It was a play. It was a little short play, whatever, And then the people who were very interested in that began to listen. And we would say, now, let me hear you answer that. What did I just ask you? Was that true? And you bring them into this play acting, to this life, to this play happening on the subway, going from 125th Street all the way down to 59th Street, and there we to 96th Street rather, and there we were getting off, and we go and do the same thing on the platform until we got down in the village, right? And then we were heading for what we were heading for at that particular time was doing a one-act play, a short, about a 15, 20-minute play, whatever, and bringing people in. And it always had a message. But one of the interesting things I like to tell this audience is that one day Baraka said, we need to go into the bars, Sonia. And I said, yes, we do need to go to the bars, right? So we went into a bar in the afternoon, and Baraka said to the guy behind, he said, hey, you own this place? The guy said, yes, it's my place. He said, can we come in and read some poetry tonight? And the guy fell out laughing. He fell out laughing behind the bar. He said, you want to do what? Baraka said, I said, we want to come in and read some poetry. We read poetry. We're poets, whatever. The guy said, are you out of your mind? He said, these bloods come in here, to talk and drink, whatever. And Baraka said, well, we're coming though, okay? We'll be here at 8:30. Lo and behold, we walked in at 8:30. The place was jumping. Baraka went over to the jukebox and pulled the plug. And then all of a sudden the music was gone. There was silence, and everybody stopped and looked. And so I looked at Baraka, and he said, motherfucker, and I said, yeah, he was a motherfucker. That's how we got the people in. We used some words that brought them in. Do you really think he was a real motherfucker? He was a real motherfucker. He was a motherfucker. But we ain't motherfuckers, are we? No, we ain't motherfuckers. Impromptu. Here we were. We got that. They got quiet. People turned around and looked. If they had the backs, they turned around. They turned their shirt around. We never said another curse word, and we started reading the poems that we had brought, whatever. When we finished, those people stood up and stamped their feet. That's what we were doing. That's what Brett talked about. That's where we went. We went there, and they said, don't go, come on, have some drink. Baraka took a couple of drinks. So I said, give me a Coke, whatever. And they kept asking, and do you all have theater? We said, yes, we do. He told them where the theater was, right? The Black Arts Theater was, come out. And a lot of the people did come out because on Friday and Saturday nights in a place called Harlem, there were lines all the way around that block, whatever, where people came in to hear the music, hear the poetry read, whatever. We took the same thing to a place called San Francisco when we also went out there to begin Black Studies, right? And we've had to figure out, how can we get the people to come in? How can we get the students to come in, the Latinos, the whites, the Black students to come in? How can we get, the Asian students to come in? They don't know what we're going to do. So we decided we would cook free lunch. We advertised free lunch. Come have free lunch, whatever. And they come in and they sit down we arrange tables, whatever, and we would then begin to do the work that needed to be done. We began. So the first time we did that, Barack and I were on the stage, facing. And if you ever saw Barack, he moved and whatever, and he went on, and I answered him with another poem, and he asked me, and we were up there just having fun, just laughing at each other. And the people stood up and clapped. And then one guy stayed standing. He said, that was really very, very good. At the time, his name was still Leroy Jones, Mr. Jones, and Sister Sonia. He said, but would you mind doing that again? Because you all spoke so fast, we can understand exactly everything you were saying. And Barack and I looked at each other and said, we said, what? We didn't go that fast. And we began to realize it's an amazing thing. On that stage, and that school was San Francisco State, with our first reading there, bringing people in to come to join the club, to join the Black Studies, to go register for classes later on at some point, we realized that there was a different tempo that was going on in a place called San Francisco. And so we actually redid most of the poems again at a slower pace. I love the rappers. I love the brothers and sisters who came behind us. They came because they, as their mothers said to me, they heard you all read, they heard the rapid pace and they picked up on it, right? And they also did that, and there they were, these young men and women coming behind us, picking up on the beauty of the words, the beauty of the poetry, the accenting of the poetry, the loudness, the softness, all of that, the fastness of that. They did that on stage. And so never again. What that meant is that when the rappers and when the poets came out to read in a place called San Francisco and LA and Denver, whatever, they would never say, do that again, because the rappers brought that fast pace, the fast pace that we did quite often when we read, they went much faster, whatever. So therefore, they took around the country that fast pace of poetry, that fast pace of listening to the words that they were giving to the universe, giving to the students. We were never asked again to repeat what we had said, because they had continued what we had begun in a place called America, right? I mean, that is the beauty of all that. And so many of us then would write plays. Many of us would do, if you read us, most of the plays are one actors, and they were one act plays because, for 1 hour, because we wanted very much, to get people. We wanted about 4 or 5 people to do 4 or 5 different plays on the stage, right? And a brother by the name of Marvin X did a play about a preacher, right? And I shall never forget it. And the preacher comes into his house. It's dark. He begins turning on lights, and he says, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know what I'm going to do. But before he had come in, there was a burglar in there taking things, stealing things, putting in. When he heard when he heard the preacher coming in, putting the key in the lock, he went behind the drapes, right, and stood there, and he began to shake. Said, "Oh my God, I've gotten caught. I stayed too long in here." But the preacher came in, got on his knees, and started to pray. "What do I do? These white folks want me to get up and stop all the work that these young people are doing. I don't want to get involved with these young people. I don't know what they're saying, what they're talking about. I don't understand it. I'm a preacher. I'm a man of God, you know." And all of a sudden, the burglar comes from, speaks from behind the curtain, says, "Get up off your knees." Whatever. And the dialogue begins between the preacher, you know, and the burglar. It is the funniest play you could ever listen to. The audience roared when that happened, you know, but the information that came down also too is that by the time the burglar leaves with all his goodies, whatever, right, and said, "Now you go out there in the world and teach the people," the preacher was ready to go out and the next day, you know, and teach what he was asked to teach, right, and become a part of a movement. It was an amazing play. It was one of the funniest plays you could ever wish to see. It's a play that could be done again today, again and again, and the same response will be with the audience. These are the things that people began to do. You know, the plays were done, but they were not just done with words. They were done with music. They were done with dance. You know, they were done with people getting in each other's faces. It was done with people fighting amongst themselves. It was done with people saying simply the message, "You got to change." So there at 125th Street, Barbara Ann Tier then would mix us all together, bring people from the audience to become actors. When someone said something to them, they had to answer, and they answered, and they became the actors on stages. They began to pick up what people were saying. Barbara would sit down, I would sit down, and they would take over the stages. You know, it was an amazing thing that happened, that transformation that happened there. And this is the kind of thing that we did in terms of theater. Now, we learned from Brecht, we learned from Barbara Ann Tier, we learned from Ed Bullis, we learned from Brother Amir Amidi, you know, with the kind of plays that they did. We taught, you know, people how to write plays. We taught people how to write poetry, you know, but one of the things we always did, we went out on weekends, right, to spread the word. And let me tell you, sometimes some students had invited us to come down the peninsula. And if you know California, there's some parts of California that you didn't go to at all. And we went to the school. When we went to the school, you know, we looked up and Baraka and Marvin X and Ed Bullen said, "Oops." You know, I mean, they were like down front, there were about 5 Blacks who had invited us, and the rest was this white audience. And we had planned this massive, massive thing about change, whatever. We did it anyway. And then we all got up the stage very fast, went to our car, you know, got in the car because other people got in their cars also too and began to follow us. That was all the way down in a place called California, where they did not want to hear anything about change, you know, about revolution, about what it meant to be Black, whatever. And I remember when we got ready to get on the freeway, we got on the freeway going the wrong way. And the brother driving the car made a U-turn and kept going the other way. But those are the things that we did when we began to write our plays. We wrote our plays. I did a play called Sister Sonji, and the play begins. There's just scenery, which is added to as it goes along, very creative. There are no breaks in the action at all. The action goes from one part of the room to the next part of the room. And it begins with this woman who is in her late 80s. And she says this soliloquy, you know, that she's old now, you know, that, but they had changed the country and that they had good property down in the South, right? property that they own, right? The government took care of them. They had changed so many things in America that no longer did they have the problems amidst the races. And it tells the backdrop of what happened. The woman gets out of the chair. She hobbles over this. She becomes an 18-year-old running, a college student, and that goes on for her life. And it ends with her coming back to the chair, asking the question, will you also, when you get to be at this age, will you also have helped your people move forward? These are the things that we did. I did a play called The Bronx is Next. The Bronx is Next was about people who have been sent into Harlem and to the Bronx, right, to live with Black families and Latino families, right, to live with them, to give them information, to feed them when they were hungry, to make sure that the children were safe, whatever. They lived there for 1 year, and then their job was to burn down Harlem because Harlem was not taking good care of its people. And it was a trek south. It was part of a 3-part play that they would then get the people out and start the walk, because they had already bought property in the South. Many of the things that had people were doing at this particular time is that many people had returned to the South and bought property, whatever. So there was property there. And so therefore you see this long line of Blacks walking, not riding, but walking. And every place they went, right, they would stop and eat, right, and go. And there were always cars making sure that they were okay, that no one really got hurt. This was that return to the South, going back home, going back to the property that had been taken away. They had been buying up property all along, right? Setting up their schools where people would teach them properly, doing the colleges again, because you do know that many of the colleges that Blacks went to were set up by Black folks also too, and just have a community where it was safe and people could move and walk and live and eat and dance and talk as human beings and not be suppressed as they were at that time up north. This is the work that we did, my brothers and my sisters sitting in the audience. This is how we learned. This is how we came into every place that we went, every class we went into, and became an information. And I had studied at the Schomburg with Miss Jean Hudson, who was an amazing woman. And she had a comrade in arms also too. And they had all these amazing books. And I had stumbled into the Schomburg when I graduated from Hunter College. I had answered an ad. I answered an ad for a job. And I went there, and they wanted someone to write for them. And I sent my CV, and I sent a sample of my writing, and I got a telegram. Maybe some of you sitting here don't know what a telegram is, but we know what a telegram is. They would send this little yellow thing, it was delivered overnight, whatever. And mine said, please report to work. I have been hired as a writer to write what they were doing. Can you imagine? And I took that telegram and I said to my father, see, I can get a job. I don't have to teach, because I had a teaching job coming up in September since I graduated in January, right? And I said, see, my father just said, well, you go downtown and see what happens. But lo and behold, I went downtown. I was let into the office. I sat down, and all of a sudden, a head came out. Another head came out, and a guy came out and said, yes, can I help you? And I got up and I took the telegram out and handed it to him. And he looked at the telegram and he looked at me. He looked and read the telegram again, and he looked at me again. He read the telegram again, and he did this to his head and looked at me again and said, I'm sorry, the job is taken. And I said, well, no. It says report to work at 9 o'clock. I know I got here too early. I came in with the secretary. What I will do, I'll go outside, right? And I'll wait until 9 o'clock. And then I will come in and the job will be mine. Isn't that so? And the guy said, lady, I said the job is taken. I said, that can't be. No one's here. I'm the first one here. He said, the job is taken. Get out the office, right? And he goes out the door. And I said, I raised my voice. I know discrimination. I'm going to report you to the Urban League, right? You know, and you can hear the guy saying, "Who cares?" or whatever. And the secretary is typing with the old typewriter, never looking up. And I would leave there and go uptown to Harlem to go in and to report what had happened. And I just by chance got off at 135th Street, got the wrong train and Lenox Avenue. And I'm going up the block and there's a sign that said Schomburg Library. And there's a guy outside taking a quick smoke. And I said, sir, what is the Schomburg? He said, lady, sign in the book right there, go inside, go up the steps, go inside, and you'll see. And I did that. And I looked and there was this long, long table, this huge room. And there were nothing but Black men sitting there with books stacked up like that. And there was a glass door with a woman sitting inside. I knocked on the door and I said, I told her my name. And she said, I said, what is the Schomburg? She said, oh, my dear, she said, the Schomburg has books only by and about Negroes. And me and my fresh 19-and-a-half-year-old mouth, I said, there must not be many books in here then, right? She never let me forget that. Every time I came to the Schomburg with my classes from Temple, from Amherst, wherever I was teaching, we would get a charter, a bus and come in and do the research. She used to tell that same story about, let me tell you a story about your professor. But that's what we did. My dear brothers and sisters, I know I probably went too long, right? Did I go too long? Hello, somebody say something.
I'm having a good time.
No, you didn't go too long, my dear sister, but do you want to talk about your plays?
Yes, I did talk about one plays. One play I did, which is I love very much. It was a play about Black women who were in theater and in the music business, right? And they and how they were exploited by managers, by husbands, by families, whatever. And I saw it up close with our family and watching the people who came through. And I thought, let me do this. Let me do a play so therefore people can see exactly what happens, right? And I call the play I'm Black when I'm singing, I'm blue when I ain't. And I'll just want to just read this little beginning. It begins, the characters are Rena, Mama B, Tony, Malika, Doctor, Attendant Sam, Catholic matron, business manager, Mary, John, Josephine, chorus dancers, place and time, 1980s and 1920 in Detroit, Atlanta, and New York City. Act 2, okay, that's Act 1. But Act 1 says the following: a room, gray and white stripes, no windows. In the center of the room is a small cot. To the left is a small desk and chair. To the right is a piano. Upstage is a child's play stove with pots and pans and a play sink. Around the room, there are clothes racks. On them hang dresses, hats, and other costumes for actors. A woman between 45 years of age is stretched out on the cot. She has on a long white hospital gown with white tights, no shoes. She wears a diamond tiara, diamond earrings, and a diamond bracelet. She is humming a tune that seems familiar. She rises, goes to the desk, and picks up some brown paper and spreads it out on the floor. Center stage, she smooths it out. Then she squats on the paper. She is humming softly and grunting, and she sings, "The color of death is gray and white. The color of my life is white and gray. They are different and yet the same, don't you know? I learned all this in a cabaret," sings. "The color of this room is white and gray. The color of my mind is gray and white. They are different and yet the same, don't you know? A dog licks the hand, it's gonna bite." Ha ha! And then she laughs. She gets up from squatting and shakes herself. then moves over to the place stove and gets a pot. Returning to the brown paper, she begins to spoon the imaginary feces into the pot. She continues to hum the song. Then she takes it to the place stove and begins to cook, removes the pot and goes to the cot and begins to eat. As she eats, she glances up at the audience for the first time, extends hand. Want some? Want some? Then she laughs. Oh, no, it ain't too bad. It's solid, don't look so shocked. We eat what we can get. We can in this hellhole. Stands up. But wait now, I haven't welcomed you properly, my audience, my dear, hard-playing, hard-paying audience. Here now, I'll straighten this part of my bed for you. Puts down pot. There is smoothed out just for you. Some of my space. Welcome. And then she laughs and sits down. Such as it is. Extends the pot again. Are you sure you don't want any? And she laughs a gutsy laugh. Ha, ha, ha. Continues to eat. Concentrates on the pot. Slowly looks up. Don't look so disgusted. You there sitting in your middle class conformity. You think I'm mad, don't you? You should be grateful that I'm offering you this little shit. It's control shit. Institutionalized shit. There's so much more of it out there. Last. That's running loose, and you always falling in it and always taking it too. She continues to eat. Looks up quickly. There. I caught you staring again. Don't you know? That's bad manners. My mother always taught me the proper thing to do in North Philadelphia. Now, Rena, sit up straight there, girl. Remember, a black girl is bad enough, but a hunchback, slouchback, bad posture, black girl is the worst. My mother could always hit the nail right on the back. Last. I came from Philadelphia. Guess you guessed that by now. I was a genius when I was a child. Do you know? Do you hear? Mathematical and musical genius. Equations poured from my mouth, and I square-rooted my runes into the streets of Philadelphia. My hand took shape with music right before my eyes. I had a concert when I was 4. I marched out on the concert stage. Face greased, legs and arms greased, and played the old masters. This young one did in those old dudes. And when I finished, and when they had clapped for me and my mother, and we have bowed 25 times, we went home on the Broad Street train together. And all she kept saying was, I hope they didn't think you were too black. I just hope they didn't care about that part of it. And that's how it starts. And so in this play, what happens is that we began with a woman who is institutionalized, and it's because she has been beaten up by her agent, by her husband, money stolen from her, right? And she is a great singer, until one day she decides not to sing, and they figure she's crazy, so they put it in this place. And it's done, by the way, in poetry form. And I wrote the music for it also too, because she also sings. She's a singer. It is a Billie Holiday kind of character who comes in as a little girl. Since she was sent, her mother she had been beaten up, and she had done something wrong, and they brought her to one of these places where there were nothing but nuns, right? And in it I show how she gets she's in the car, she comes with the nuns, and she goes there, and this nun, the head mother, disrespects her and says something to her, and so I said, answer, you little monster, and she spits in the nun's face. I mean, this is how this goes, and then you have the great singer like Bessie Smith, who is left in the streets to die, in the South, whatever, and all of what happens to her also too. This woman, when she's on the stage, I have her on the stage, and she sings and brings the house down, and people come and throw flowers at her, and they cry, they sob, whatever, but she could not go to a hotel in Detroit, Michigan. So they had these places, I've forgotten now what it's called. They had these places I write about where they brought all of the musicians and all the great singers to these places, right? And they would feed them. And she walked into the house. She had a room. She changed her clothes. She put on an easy dress. She got out of all the fancy clothes and the hat, whatever. And she comes over and she starts to drink. She loved to drink, this woman, And when she started to drink, she started to flirt with women, whatever. And she ended up falling out on the floor, whatever, right? and instead of people, this play is about ostensibly about how agents, mind you, do terrible things to these great people, how husbands and wives and other people, do terrible things to these people. Here, the people were just throwing roses and flowers on the stage. She falls out in this drunken state and begins to sing, whatever. And they do an amazing dance around her, and they begin to kick her because, they saw her weakness, whatever. And this is about, okay, I started out talking about the agents, and the families, right? Maltreating these people of talent, these people who are amazingly amazing, whatever. But here we now have the people who have praised her, and they're not the agents, but they're people saying, look at her there. And instead of picking her up, right, and taking her and getting washcloths and singing to her, and singing a lullaby song and wiping all the things off and putting something on for her to sleep in, and rubbing her feet and rubbing her hands and telling her how much they loved her. They loved how she had taken care of us all these years and kept us alive. This is about the artist who is always suspect, that everybody suspects the artist. The person who gets up on the stage and talks about changing the world is suspect. The person who gets up and makes you cry, and you cry when you go out the theater, you go, oh, she made me cry, she's suspect, whatever. And the artist who comes in and says, I'm going to let down my hair, I've been on the road, I haven't had a decent bed to sleep in, and she gets drunk and she falls out, suspect, whatever. The artist is always suspect, if you truly understand what I'm saying. So therefore, that's why it's so much work sometimes. That's why it takes so long for people to really listen to what you're saying, because we are suspect. And so that play goes on until the Bessie Smith character, is killed on a road in the South, right? The character who is in the insane asylum, right, is visited by this woman who says that, I've come to take your place. You've done all the magical work you can do. I'm strong enough to do this. And they have this woman, who is in this insane asylum, and they're going to keep her there probably for a long time. Doesn't want to give up her singing, but they do amazing. The director did this amazing dance, and song at the same time, where they knock each other down and they get up, whatever. It's an amazing moment on stage. I know when I saw what the director had done, when I first saw the play done, I put my head down, and just listened to the music, whatever. And then this woman says simply, that I will replace you now, that I have the strength, I've been given the strength, to continue this, to do the work that needs to be done, right? And then she moves away, the old one, the one who had been there, in an insane asylum, and this woman turns and sings a song, a very modern day song, a song that is very progressive, about what we must do in order to survive. So I did the lyrics. I didn't do the music, but I've seen it done on 3 or 4 occasions, and each time the music has been different. From the blues to the jazz, to all these different kinds of songs that you expect for them to sing, but always teaching us about our artists, that they are to be protected, that they are the ones that keep us alive, they keep us going, they keep us strong, they make us begin to understand change, right? They make us understand the world and see the world for what it is, how beautiful it is, and how we contribute to that beauty also too. I love that play, by the way. It was a hard play to write.
We were talking about that play today, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we were talking about that and saying that we should do that in your theater,
Right.
in the Sonia Sanchez theater.
It was just done out west.
Yes,
I forgot the name of
Seattle.
the. Yeah, you would know the theater, and they got a great response for it. Because it tries to teach us simply, what we really must do, but above all, it rescues the artist. The artist is not to be maltreated. The artist is the one, who then helps us via theater, via poetry, via dance, to stay alive and to continue to do the work that needs to be done.
So we have two questions. I'm wondering if the two of you could hang on for a bit more.
Yeah, yes? Jim's all ready to ask the questions. Look at him.
Okay, Jim Aldi, he just perked up. Okay.
No, I'm good. Unfortunately, the heating system here at UMass has gone screwy, so it's about 800 degrees in my office.
Oh,
so
that's why you kept
if I look like I'm drooping a little bit, it's not because I'm not enjoying it. It's because
right. Okay.
I feel like I should jump in like to a hole in the ice and get sauna or something.
Okay, well, we can't watch you do that right now.
No, that would be bad.
That would be real theater, right? But we might get banned for it. Okay.
Yes, that's right. That's right. So here's one. Do you think that young people are as artistically committed today as they were back in the 60s and the 70s with the creation of the Black arts movement? Young people, you think they are as committed today as they were?
Yeah, actually, I do. I think there's some things that are different that you have to get your hand. I mean, I think, I was thinking this as I was listening to Sonia and also thinking about when she talked about the past and thinking about somebody like Lorraine Hansberry, who is important because for a lot of reasons, but not to get it, the Raisin in the Sun, but, we could say lots of things about A Raisin in the Sun. But one of the things to say about it is that when it went on tour after playing in New York and traveled all over the US to, places like Detroit and
right.
Cleveland and what have you, that Black theater workers or people who are interested in young Black people who are interested in the theater, people like Ron Milner in Detroit and Woody King in Detroit before he came to New York, they saw A Raisin and they said it wasn't just that it was the Black actors, although that was important, but there are other Black actors, not usually lead actors, not usually dramatic actors outside of some theaters in Harlem and a few other places, but that was impressive. The story was impressive. He said, Ron Milner said, well, I could recognize that family. It seemed like a family I could imagine. But I think what's really important to them is, Black playwright, Black director, even some places Black tech, stagehands, scenery, people doing scenery, what happened, things that Black people were more or less banned from, was kind of Jim Crow from, for the most part, across the United States. And Ron Milner, and I remember saying, I talked to him and he saw that and said, why can't we? They did it. Why can't we do it? We could do that in Detroit. He said, I recognize that family in the south side of Chicago, but I want to put Hastings Street. That, was sort of the main drag of Black Detroit in his youth. I want to put Hastings Street on stage and so forth. And I think what that helped do, and you saw that in all kinds of things in the Black arts movement, is people saying, the just do it kind of mentality. Like, yes, they honored their forebears. They honored Sterling Brown. They honored Theodore Ward. They honored Ellis Childress and Rose McClendon and all those folk. But that they fundamentally weren't waiting for anybody. They weren't waiting for seniority where they get a chance. They weren't waiting in line. They were, kind of like the sit-in people, youth in SNCC. I mean, they didn't wait around they had some mentors, but they didn't wait around for someone to tell them that it was okay for them to do it. They just did what they thought they had to do. And so that's a long way of getting to, I think young people now, and have for some time, I mean, Sonia talked about hip hop. What was hip hop? But young people, Black and Puerto Rican people in the Bronx first and elsewhere later, saying we don't have to wait for a record contract. We don't have to have a band. We can do this.
Yes.
We can do this with what we've got. I think the difference right this minute, if I were to have to say it, is that there's a funny way in which technology allows people to reach out and get in touch with communities and do things musically, even theatrically, and gain audiences in ways that are, you don't have to depend on a record company. You don't have to depend on a Broadway producer or even an off-Broadway producer. You don't have to do a lot of stuff. But I do think that something, I'm not saying that it doesn't happen some places, but something has been lost I'm not entirely sure if there is the intense focus. I mean, there is conceptually in hip hop, but in terms of performance on neighborhood, on the grassroots, in the same kind of way that say Sonia describes as Amiri and Sonia going into a bar in Harlem and say, we want to read poetry. I mean, I know people who do this. I mean, I know people who do this, but as a kind of movement, I think that might be, it might be because you're able to do it other ways, through electronically, through various social media, various kinds of ways that you can reach out to folks, which I think has been really powerful and good in a lot of ways. But I'm not even sure that, and it was shorter lived than Black Power and Black Arts, as a real mass movement. Even Black Lives Matter, as powerful as it was, I don't know that it had the same kind of grassroots staying power that the period that Sonia's talking about. Why that is, but the short form is, I think that young people are artistically committed. I think our young people are doing fantastic stuff. I think young Black people are doing, from what I can see, are doing amazing stuff with poetry, with the visual arts, with including theater and including stuff that they do basically in their apartments or their basements or wherever they live. With like, because Black Arts was before the video revolution. I mean, there are
That's right. Yeah.
a few like avant-garde artists, like the Korean artist Namjoon Paik, that was doing some stuff, but basically that wasn't accessible to people, and film was real. There were Baraka and some other people tried to do some stuff with film, but that was really, really expensive.
Right.
I mean, and
right.
so now I think
that
people can do it, but I'm not sure that I feel the same kind of grassroots, from the bottom up community stuff in the same way. So I mean, though I'm old, so I don't, I don't, it's not for me to be doing it in that sense. I mean, but I certainly feel their creativity. Amazing music, amazing theater, amazing poetry, actually.
Right.
We have one more question. What advice do you have for aspiring artists, activists who want to continue the work in the present and the future?
I think that one of the things you must do is that you should try to gather people around you. You should try to get a group of people. Sometimes you might only have 2 or 3 people who might go out and do this work, and get people who will study together, who will write together, who will put programs on together, who will go out and solicit from people, can I come into can I come in? We used to go into the schools that can we come in and do a program, and they said, we have no money. We said, oh, you don't have to pay us. Right. You come in, you do it for free, like we did in the bar. I think that I hope to see that many of the young people also will be motivated to do it on that level, to do the street theater, we would go downtown in the village, right? Right us in that area, and we would stop, and we had said that we'll be here at 12 o'clock on Sunday, right? And we were there, and we would like go, and all of a sudden, Baraka would start reading, our skill would begin reading, I would read, whatever. And then people just stood there and they said, "You're going to be here next week?" We say, "Yeah, we're going to be here next week." I mean, that street poetry, the street plays that people did. We were so excited about that, that when we got to a place called San Francisco, we said, some of the people saw us at night and said, "Can you come over to Oakland, across the river?" And we said yes, because they said, "We want to get all these Black folks over there in Oakland, to come hear you." So we said, "On Sunday." So we got up and we drove there. We got there at 9 o'clock on Sunday, right? And we started playing drum, boom, 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 and singing boom, boom, boom. And the guy came outside and said, "Oh, okay, look, 9 o'clock. We said, "Yeah, you can come, but come back at 12." Right. On a Sunday, you cannot go and tell people you're going to come and start doing your theater, right? Right there at 9 o'clock on a Sunday. That was the one thing we learned. We were so excited about doing this that we showed up at 9 o'clock and put our things down, and we started with the music and the drum. And the guy, I can still see this guy coming out, said, oh, yeah. No, you're too early. Come back at 12 o'clock. Nobody does anything before 12 o'clock. So we said, I think we asked, "Is there some place to get something to eat or whatever?" And the guy pointed some way. We went and got some juice, whatever, etc. And we came back at 12 o'clock and we did the theater. They had gathered people around. But that is amazing. What you can do there. That is amazing, of what we did in order to get more people to join BSU, the Black Student Union, by doing those programs on a Wednesday, right? And feeding people, that people came and joined. They joined, the Black Student Union. They came and they registered for the classes that were there at San Francisco State. It was utterly amazing. And to this day, I always like performing outside. There's a different kind of smell that happens, I mean, you can smell the energy coming from people outdoors, right? You can see them and they respond to what is going on outside. And so you begin to do your 30-minute play, or your hour play, your 45-minute play, whatever. You began to do the poetry. I like to just tell them that when we first went out to do something in one of these auditoriums, one of these places where they had a basement. I think it was the basement of a church, right? And we got up on stage and we were just doing this poetry, whatever. And there were like about these young men had been brought in. So the first 3 rows, all these young men, right? And other people sitting behind them. And someone said, while we were reading, he said, "What they doing up there?" And other guys said, "They reading poetry, man." "Oh, I thought they was going to sing or something." And so the first row got up and left, whatever. And we stopped and looked at each other, and we said, "Okay, whatever." The rest of the people stayed, the adults stayed, whatever, etc. But 1 year later at the Fillmore, 1 year later of going to all these little places, to go into these church places and whatever, to these schools, the Fillmore was filled. People were hanging for the rafters, and they came to hear Marvin X. I forgot the sister who was over across the river, but Marvin X, Ed Fullins, Baraka,
Sarah Fabio, maybe?
Sarah Fabio, right. We started, and they set it up, whatever. And the people were literally illegal. I mean, they were hanging out how you're up in the balcony, hanging through, their feet were hanging through, whatever. And we started to read. And from the moment it started, it grew the crescendo. I mean, it just got louder and louder, whatever, etc. And I remember looking down, and we were some of the same people who'd done this before, whatever. And by the time it got to the end of myself and Baraka, the place burst. It was like you thought that the ceiling was going to burst out loud, whatever, etc. People stood up. I thought someone was going to jump off, and he said, "No, no, do not jump from the balcony," right? Whatever. That was the kind of energy, and we knew that what we had done in a year was showing on the stages of America. And we knew also it had spread around before. I mean, this theme that we started at the Black Arts Repertory Theater at BART in a place called New York City, right, had spread to Chicago and to Detroit, you know, and a little bit out in California and in the South also too. It had spread, and people, and we were going back and forth amongst taking the word, saying to people what they could do, the importance of having these programs, the importance of engaging your children. So also that's one of the reasons why we began to write these children. Began to write these children's plays also too, so they could become a part of it. And just to have seen the children perform those plays was something was really beautiful. I tell you, the memories are so, I mean, it happened so many years ago, but I can still see the audience and people standing up, you know, and people saying, "No, no, no, don't go, don't leave, keep going, keep going. We want to hear some more. My child needs to hear this, you know, let my child come up on stage and say something." I mean, people sent their children up on stage, and you would grab them by the hand and you just say, "Well, I'm going to say some words," and you repeat it. And so you would say a little song, a little word, a little poem that was a young poem, and the child would say it, and then you would say it again, and the child all of a sudden got the rhythm and was saying it better than you were saying it. You know, this is how you begin to educate people, to bring people into that arena. Like, you know, this is change. This is what we can do. And it ends up in a place, Barbara Ann Teer. It ends up with people later on Broadway also too. Hopefully with more of those plays that also begin to speak, you know, to what is happening in a place called America, you know, and how we have got to change it. So therefore, when they left us, they were leaving, remembering. They took with them, you know, the energy. They took with them what they had heard, what they had seen. They took with them the hugs that they had given other people and the tears. They took those tears, they let it just go right down their face, dry up on their faces, and they took that home with them. And you can see the change beginning to happen. You know. Anyway, it was Black arts, my dear sister, my dear brother. Every place we went and what we had done and had begun, you saw the same thing being repeated. You know, you saw one thing, you saw bookstores come about, the Black bookstores come about. You saw the little theaters come about, whatever. You saw people going to the churches, right? Doing things, programs on a Sunday, and children getting up, performing also too. You know, this is what began to happen, you know, in the theaters, and you saw the people get in these theaters and doing plays on the weekends. But most certainly, what we did in at University of Pitt is going out on the weekends. And you know, I remember seeing the first night that people perform one act plays, Baraka, whatever, there at in Harlem, that the lines went all the way down the corner, down those long blocks, you know, the long blocks in Harlem, and turned a corner and came around and met the other people. Isn't that amazing? You know, and we saw that happen all over when we went to a place called San Francisco, that in the house that was gotten there for one of the brothers in the Panther Party, who was leading the Panther Party at that time. I'm blanking on his name. You saw what was happening. Also, the same thing, that on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, the people came in. They came in to be fed. They came in to be fed via the belly and also the head and the heart also too. And
Right.
people began to move and change at an accelerated pace.
Can I just say one little thing? I know it must be close to the end of time, but along what the lines of what Sonia's saying, and something closer to our own moment now is both Sonia and I were at Amiri Baraka's funeral in Newark, New Jersey. I don't know how many of your folks have been across the river and over Newark Bay to Newark, but have some idea. Basically, a blue collar, former industrial, no longer, and mostly industrial, mostly Black city. And I just, I suspect that most of the people in your class here, a lot of them are people who are thinking about making a career as theater workers or whatnot, many of them, and being artists. And the thing that was remarkable about it is, Sonia would say, is there were some big stars, big names in Black art, Black politics, and so forth on the stage. And there was a pretty diverse audience, but it was in Symphony Hall in Newark and Broad Street. Thousands, and I mean thousands of people are in there, of whom I would say at least 3/4 of them were everyday Newark people.
That's right.
To say Black, working class Black people from Newark. And they weren't all old folks. They weren't all from Amiri's generation. They weren't even all from his kids' generation. There was a whole range of them. And I guess what I'm saying, what I wanted to say is, as you think about the legacy of that moment and people who worked like Sonia, or worked like Amiri, is that that there is something to be said for a certain kind of artistic life, a certain kind of dedication to community, doing the kind of work that Sonia describes, that you won't get rich doing it, but at the same time, you make a life doing it, and then at the end of things, to have thousands of people from your community, say in a place like Newark, New Jersey, which is not like a hip art place, not traditionally, certainly, come out to see you off, to send you home. I mean, there's a lot worse ways you could end your, if you could look down on yourself, end your career, to think about, well, this was worth something.
That's
So
right.
what I'm saying is part of the legacy of that moment, but also, in terms of advice. I know you were mostly asking Sonia, which is the right thing to do, not me, but it's also, I think, to think, I mean, in a 21st century modality, because things change, to think like that, because again, there's a worse ending to your career than have that kind of tribute that Amiri had. I don't think a poet in the United States probably ever got that kind of sent off by the everyday people of his community, as well as some illustrious art types.
Yeah. He was important. I grew up in Newark, New Jersey, and he was a very
really?
important, very
Where were you from?
Newark.
But where in Newark?
Where in Newark?
Yeah.
Woodside Avenue, below Forest Hills.
Yeah. Okay. My family is from Roseville.
Oh, okay.
So nearby.
Well, this has been extraordinary, you two, and I just want to let you know, we had a poetry reading with the great poets Terrence Hayes and Evie Shockley and Brenda
Evie's
Shockley.
wonderful.
Yeah, they're
Terrence Hayes, but I know her better.
Right.
and it was on Halloween, and we were told, oh, the students won't come. And not only did they come, and they came in costume, the poet said that was okay, but we had, Jim, you've never been to the studio, but Sonia knows the rooms, and we had over 110 people show up for a poetry reading. And I just, the message that the two of you are giving to our students. We're so grateful to you both.
Mhm.
I hope everybody out there is really hearing this, and you're so generous with your time, and we're just so grateful. So we're going to end the program, but stay
Yeah.
on. Just
We
so
want to thank
Thank
them. We want to thank
Thank
this.
you to everybody for
Thank you.
coming.
All the people. Yeah.
thank you. And we're going to do that play. I wanted you to do that play tonight.
Okay. Okay. We would
Okay.
definitely do that play. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for coming. And I think Tom is going to come on and say hi to the two of you. And just thank you so much.
And thanks the people for coming. Right.
Thank
Yes,
you, Joanne.
Right.
Thanks,
I mean,
thanks
we're going to have
Reggie.
a lot of
Thanks, everybody.
conversation in class about what the two of you have said tonight.
Okay. Tell them thanks a lot for coming. You know, and if you need us to come to the class, we'll come to the class, right?
Okay. We're getting a lot of thank yous from Marianne and Adri and Malia. Oh, I'm so glad they're there. Those are
Oh,
our first
good.
year students.
Oh, good. Tell them we said
Oh,
hello.
great.
Thanks.
Oh, this is wonderful. There's just a lot of hearts and thank yous. Oh, I can't wait to see them on Thursday.
Okay.
All right. Good night, everybody. Good night. Good night.